Hi, I'm Corinne, and this is Free Press Fail here with John Burnett for episode 5. We're just saying there's so much to talk about this week, thankfully. Endless crisis with the Biden administration, and the only benefit is this amazing podcast series. So, John, the baby food shortage is finally making news. It's actually been happening for a while, but I feel like the mainstream really picked it up this week. And Congress is getting involved, and now, of course, it's like ultra politicized. Every headline I saw this morning was like Republicans vote against babies, which apparently we like babies again. It's not good. Which is totally not true. There were 2 bills on the House floor this week. One was just a handout to the FDA, who caused this crisis in the first place. And one was actually to help, I guess WIC only covers certain formulas, and the formulas that WIC covers currently are not on the shelves. They're most affected by the crisis. So the bill helps those moms who needed that service apply those funds to formula that is actually being sold in our stores. So that was basically the only action we can take, because even if we fund $28 billion to the FDA, they can't buy formula that is not there, that it has not been produced. So what a whole media crisis this has been.
You know, it was an edification process for me when I analyzed a lot of these different issues that are bubbling up. I had no idea that the FDA had oversight over baby formula, right? I thought that was a free enterprise type of product. I understand the national security elements of it, but to the point that you just made, it sheds even more light on the FDA creating the chaos from the beginning without a backup plan. If you shut down production and you know how vital it is, you have to figure out how are you going to make up for the inevitable shortage. Herein lies how poorly government manages not only crises, but also situations dealing with our economy specifically. So whether you're talking about foreign affairs, talking about the economy, talking about regulation, taxation, very little thought is actually contemplated on, well, if I do this, this is going to affect Y. If I do X, this is going to affect Y. And if it's going to affect Y, then what solutions will I have in place? So it's really troubling. In the working class, forget working class, everyone in America should be alarmed by this and should call into question more government control.
Yeah, I think executive regulation is out of control. Really, the FDA halted production in a major manufacturing company in America with little oversight. This is not Congress, which I would still think it was bad if Congress did it, but at least we have some oversight there. We have elections every 2 years. But this is an executive regulation. I can't name one person that works at the FDA, and I live in Washington, D.C. I should know at least one. There's no oversight. No, you don't know who these people are. You don't know what kind of favors they're making, what kind of enemies or friends they have. And I think this particular kind of thing where they came in there, they accused this warehouse of some kind of having some kind of bacterial contamination that was responsible for the death of children. That's a very terrible accusation. So they shut them down. There has been no evidence that proves that at all. But right. What they do this a lot to help trial lawyers, because if you make the accusation, you can file a suit. And this is like a terrible marriage in Washington, D.C., where a lot of these executive agencies do these kinds of things to the benefit of lawyers who make millions of dollars from these class action lawsuits and get conspiratorial. But that is what happens. I think they completely, well, you have to believe they are insanely incompetent, as you suggested, or it was malicious, because there, like you said, there is a cause and effect. This should have been seen. So you either did it on purpose or you are actually just so incompetent that you couldn't see it was going to happen.
Right. And
babies are paying the price.
Exactly. And I can understand the reason for the pause, right? In terms of, what the bacteria or whatever the contamination was. However, when you factor in that the shutdown, you're shutting down a supplier of baby formula to the tune of 40% production. That's huge. That's not a 1%, 2%, or 5%, right? Where you can hopefully ramp up production at some point in time in the future, so that way there's no shortages. But that's 40%. That's an immediate shortage in that supply chain. So all right, I understand again the halting but how are you going to manufacture that product to keep it going, right? Because there aren't many substitutes. When you look at other products and services, if you let's say shut down 50% of the beef supply, all right, there might be some people upset because they might want to eat steak. You know what? They'll sell more chicken, people will eat more fish, or whatever the case may be. There are substitutes. When you have a product like this, of a supplier that supplies 40% to the market, is controlled and overseen by the government, and there are no substitutes, you better be thinking about cause and effect and how you're going to continue keeping the supply chain robust.
Absolutely. And I think the headlines now are just, Biden responds to this crisis, but it's of his own making. So 8 months later, he finally jumps out there and does something. He did this. He's not responding to it. He
Right.
created it. So I think he's getting a little too much credit for now he says it's bad. I think he did one press conference, one comment in the press about it. But AP, I think it was today, announced that only 2 out of 10 Americans think America is headed in the right direction, which is even worse than all of the other polls. And tied with Biden got his lowest approval ratings ever. Good week for him. He's really killing it out there.
Yes, his approval ratings is crashing like the stock market. But I'd rather put money in the stock market than double down on Biden. Look, the thing is, people are waking up all across America in every region, the rural areas as well as the urban centers. They're realizing it, right? Not just at the pump, but as they fill up to go to the grocery store, right, to pay higher prices. So they're getting hit from every direction, every angle, right? And they're seeing that their pay is not going up at the same rate. So a lot of people are concerned, and they're looking at, the outlook and saying, look, they keep talking about a recession. Is a recession coming? So that will actually potentially reduce even more spending. And, people, the woke organizations like Netflix and Disney, who've already seen high rates of cancellation, we can expect more of these, entertainment items and other discretionary items where people start pulling back from them, right? Why? Because they're trying to figure out how to adjust, the outflows, spending wise in terms of their necessities. So a lot of these things that are nice to haves, but are not a necessity, will have to go. So it's almost like a downward spiral. And now JP Morgan is talking about we can see $6 regular gasoline.
Yeah, I saw it. JP Morgan says $6.20 by fall, and AAA says $6 by August. So not looking good for us on that.
At all.
I think you're right. These corporations are getting away with a little bit less because people are cutting back, but they're also deciding, like, if our money is tighter, we're making a decision based on our values, where we're spending it. Eventually, like you said, it'll just get to the point that people are cutting back because they don't have the money to spend. But I think what we're seeing now is a lot of people are cutting back because they want to make sure the money that they have is being spent on something that they support and that they like. And I really hope with these approval ratings, one of the only good things is, maybe that's the same with our politicians. Maybe they're getting away with less because people are strapped and people are feeling it. When gas is $4 a gallon, literally across the country, not just in San Francisco, then your approval ratings should go down and people should stop putting up with you. And I hope that we see that downward spiral for them too. I saw a tweet today actually from Jesse Kelly that said, our politicians are going to be shocked by how much they don't get away with because times aren't good anymore.
That's true. They can't mask it. They can't cover it up in any way, shape, or form because and plus they can't dance around the issues like Biden is trying to do in terms of blame Putin on the gasoline prices. But people are smarter than them. They're seeing, okay, well, just follow that logic for a second. If Putin is responsible for the gasoline prices, well, how about the prices for everything else?
Yeah.
Right. So it's not just, Putin and gasoline. So their excuses, fall on face value. It just doesn't make sense. And I think it's going to, of course, Biden is safe up until the 2024 election, right? But we have the midterms. So a lot of his colleagues, his Democrat cohort, so to speak, will feel the pain immediately in this, midterm election. And hopefully, when we get some good Republican leadership in there, we'll be able to turn the tide, reduce the energy costs by tapping into our energy reserves here and work out some other supply chain issues and figure out potentially what is the next risk area, right, where we can actually start planning ahead.
Yeah, I think that's what we would need a Republican Congress for, because if we're looking at anything the Biden administration is planning, that it's the opposite of what they're doing. And I saw, the World Health Organization is meeting this weekend, and they have this big pandemic treaty that they want everyone to sign on to that would give them a lot of authority to declare pandemics and to implement lockdowns and economic shutdowns globally, which, as we know, is really most of the problems we're dealing with now. If you've strangled the supply chain for 2 years, it's going to be difficult to get it back functioning the way that we need it to. And we're seeing the effects now, 2 years after the initial lockdowns. And what is Biden planning? To give more authority to that kind of thing. So, and they don't, and actually, I think they know that it's such a bad idea that they don't want to talk about it at all. I think they're sweeping it under the rug completely, like, oh no, it's just a little meeting. But it's a huge thing to sign on to stuff that gives away your national sovereignty like that.
Yeah, that, it's really scary when you come to think about it. And, when you look at our global economy, there's a high level of interdependency. Just going back at the beginning of COVID, even before that, Americans started learning about this dependency, such that the battle between President Trump and President Xi, right, in terms of, let's say, the pharmaceutical drugs, 25% or more of the ingredients in our pharmaceuticals come from China. That's huge, right? And when you factor all these other things that are made in China, right, and then when you look at risk across the globe, look at the Ukraine, Russian war, I think it was 30% or maybe 35% of our global wheat supply comes from Ukraine and Russia, as well as our fertilizer, about 25%. Those are huge numbers. So I think we have to approach the future not just banding together among nations, but look at the U.S. and say, you know what, let's do a risk assessment across the board, across all sectors and markets, right? And look at where we are most vulnerable and figure out what our course of action would actually be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are a lot of American businesses that would be willing to do that, and American production that could handle this. I think for years we've seen, and COVID really revealed, that our regulatory agencies come down hard on American companies. And the reason that we don't produce medicine and medical devices in the United States is because the regulation makes it so cost prohibitive. But instead, we go to China, where we impose none of those regulations, none of those safety standards, and very little oversight, as we've seen with recalls and stuff from China, to the point that you're wondering, if this is stopping American production, these regulations, and you're not imposing these regulations on the foreign countries that we're importing our goods from, why do we even have them?
It's true.
Like, why have those safety standards if you're not going to impose those on the people who are actually producing the goods that you end up buying? It's just ridiculous.
It's absolutely ridiculous. But let me tell you something about strategy, and I teach this at NYU. Don't be surprised if it's the actual companies. I have no proof. I'm just using this as an example. If the actual companies are pushing for or pushed for certain regulations that would drive them offshore, because it would be cheaper to do it offshore. Because the labor costs, production costs, as well as regulatory, and then bring it back into the country. A lot of companies actually use legislation as a competitive advantage, as well as bolster their global reach and where they do business for tax purposes and other reasons. So, we have to really look at the origin, not just the legislation itself, and whether it makes sense, but how did that regulation actually bubble up? And who's the author, or who actually put the mustard behind these regulations that make no sense and place us at a disadvantage?
I mean, that's definitely an issue too. The collusion of major corporations and government has completely distorted our market. It's not a capitalist market when you're playing like that. It's
Right.
even playing field. And they do often favor those kinds of regulations that mean for sure they're the only ones that could pay for stuff. They're the only ones that could have the logistics required to have an overseas operation. They know it benefits them. And I do think that's a huge problem. And whenever we see a failure in the market, we hear the Bernie Sanders types say, like, see, this is why capitalism doesn't work. That's not capitalism. And those regulations are not capitalism. So I'm
Yeah.
need the
We need to push diversity in our supply chain, which includes regional or geographical diversity. Let's say if 30%, 40% of any given product is produced outside of this country, well, it shouldn't be concentrated. That 40% should not be concentrated in one region. It should be dispersed. So if anything happens in one place, that production could be shifted somewhere else.
Yeah, definitely. There should be some smart coordination that we haven't seen, and it's really caused an issue in the last couple of years. Though, to be fair to everyone, I do not think anyone predicted the economic stress of a global lockdown. Did not have that on the bingo card. That would be a hard one to plan for. That honestly, if you
Well,
had asked me 3 years ago if America would have ever done that, I would have said very optimistically, "No way, we wouldn't."
but I tell you how business, most people don't know this, but how business works. I was in charge of global risk and operations for S&P, one of their divisions called Platts, years ago. So going back to 2009, we were having conversations about a global pandemic, right? And each department would have to come up with plans for pandemic as well as disaster recovery, all different types of scenarios. Why? Because we owed an obligation. We had an obligation to the markets, to customers, suppliers, and so forth. So there are no excuses in business. You have to have a plan for the what if, which included pandemic. And the government should have the same type of plan.
But they're taking orders from who instead of from our people and our experts and our businesses. And that's the problem. They just want to keep doing that. Uh, but you're right. There has to be more done so that this kind of thing doesn't happen again. But uh, if it does, we know who is not going to help is the Biden's Ministry of Truth, which I think I'll take credit for complaining about so much. I think I helped personally kill it. The Disinformation Governance Board was officially put on hold indefinitely, and the head of the board resigned. And what I loved is Biden's press secretary said the reason that she resigned was because of malicious rumors about her, which is just kind of funny if you started a board to confront disinformation and you said the head of your board resigned because of disinformation. Super effective.
It's amazing how his disapproval numbers led to the dismantling of the disinformation community.
Yeah, it's scary to me. Like, I'm glad that it ended because it was so scary to me that you would so publicly assemble a board that is definitely in charge of censorship. There's no other way to put, like, you can say disinformation, misinformation. They switch between those two. I don't really know the difference, and I went to school for propaganda. Disinformation and misinformation, interchangeable, I guess. But they said this so publicly that their goal was to censor speech that they didn't think aligned with the public narrative, whatever the White House narrative was. And I think that's very scary that they even felt comfortable to say that out loud. Like,
Yeah, it is scary, right? But
yeah,
but you know what? Maybe they were testing it. Maybe it was a trial run, and they probably said, you know what? Now is not the time to pull this out. Let's table it for some point in time in the future. So this is not going away. The Democrats are going to bring this back up in the future if they get back in power. That's the reason why we need to keep them out of power.
absolutely. And they didn't need this disinformation board to censor speech previously. They have a lot of friends and corporations that do it for them. So they'll continue to do it the way they have been doing it for the last decade or so.
Absolutely. It's probably the same guidelines they use at Twitter and Facebook and so forth.
Definitely. Which is funny. So Elon Musk said he was going to buy Twitter. Then they announced this board. Now the deal's looking kind of shaky, and then this board dissolves. Because this week, Elon is like a never-ending story machine. But this week, he announced that in his discovery for the purchase of Twitter, that he's accused them of lying about their active users, even in their SEC filings, that their are millions of more bots than they've ever stated. And then there are other reports that like Joe Biden's official account is like half fake accounts. And these are pretty serious accusations because it's illegal to lie to your board members and everything about the number of active users you have. And they sell ads based on those numbers. And that is actually a very damning accusation for a company like Twitter.
And it's not just the board, it's the shareholders, right? And the SEC filings, the things of that nature, right? So it's fraud, it's manipulation, it's so many things that they could be charged with if they fudged the numbers. And people are saying, well, and some people are trying to blame Elon Musk. Oh, he's just using this as a tactic to depress the stock price to renegotiate. And I had to remind people, right, go into these posts and tweets and things of that nature, and really remind people, say, listen, every deal, even working class individuals who go to buy a house, right, or billion-dollar deals like the one that we're talking about with Twitter, after you agree on high-level terms, you go to contract, right? But that contract is contingent on the due diligence, right? Before the bank closes, they want to make sure that what you're buying is a legitimate asset. In business, we call that due diligence, right? So nobody wants to buy fake goods. They want real goods. And in this case, the goods are actual people behind actual accounts. No one wants to buy bots. Why? Because bots are worthless. So if they manipulated the data, and if you notice, one of the huge red flag is when the CEO said or claimed that Elon Musk breached the NDA by talking about it. And only our people are sophisticated enough to determine bots. Wait a second. So, no, when you're doing due diligence, you bring a third party in, right? The bank brings in an inspector. They're not going by the seller and what the seller says or any previous inspection. We're doing a current one, and it's going to be by an independent third party. So these are huge red flags all over the place.
Definitely. And I mean, I think that the accusation, the reason it's so hurtful to Twitter is because so many had those suspicions in the first place. If you had said it and no one ever suspected it, they'd be like, fake news, whatever. But like people know that there are probably a lot of fake accounts, so it rings true. It's like the perfect thing to say, but I think it is probably true, but we'll find out. But I think this thing where people are accusing, well, he's just trying to hurt Twitter. But if you look at all of the stories in the media, it goes both ways because they've been trying to drag down Elon since he made the announcement. And now this week, there's a sexual harassment claim from 2016 is coming to light. And I just think this is such an election year like thing. Something old is new again. And
you think he's running for office?
Yeah, it feels like that. But he comes out and he says he's voting Republican this year for the first time ever. And literally less than 24 hours later, they like dig up a sexual harassment charge that was settled in 2016, which I think a lot of people have come to his defense because it was a pretty it was a quickly closed settlement. She took some money, not saying, every accusation should be taken seriously, but it seems like maybe there was a reason that the case closed so quickly. Ben Shapiro came out and said, he did whatever. This is a fake thing that they're just trying to drag him down. And I think it's kind of interesting.
That happens all the time in business. We don't know what was going on at the time. Maybe he was going after a deal overseas or maybe even onshore, and you just don't want annoying things that are not factual to pop up because that molds and shapes different perception when you of let's say the counterparty when you're trying to do a deal. So sometimes in business you do a cost benefit analysis and say, you know what, it's going to cost X number in terms of legal fees, and I might lose this business over here over something false. I just rather say, you know what, let's just do a deal.
Yeah, and that seems to be the case. And some like civil rights lawyers have come out and said that the defense costs in these cases, it's always worth the settlement that this happens. Like you said, these tycoons all the time. But it is just, but they can say he's trying to destroy Twitter, but the media is working overtime to destroy him as well. So at least it's mutual.
Absolutely. And you know what? People who are concerned with democracy, they should be concerned. And they should want to know the truth of how many bots do they have on Twitter, which should drive us to also be concerned with Instagram, Facebook, and other social media platforms. Why? Because it could interfere with our elections. It could interfere with our buying patterns, right? And other consumer decisions, not just electoral decisions. So we should be concerned.
Yeah, I want to know what they're doing. Are these accounts just like sitting there inflating people's following, or are they, triggered at a certain word to reply a certain thing? It'd be kind of interesting to know what they're actually doing, because I feel like we have no clue. They could just be there sitting there like Joe Biden didn't have enough followers, so they're there. Maybe they're retweeting certain things. Maybe they're replying. How advanced are these bots, and what are they doing?
Put it this way: if there's any correlation between the number of people that showed up at his rally, right, compared to his Twitter following, if there's a correlation there, it's not going to look good for Twitter.
All 8 rally attendees are loyal followers. Retweet everything. But yeah, that was a good story. On my light note of the week was a Biden gaffe, but a little more of a serious one. Last week, Biden unveiled his a new attack against conservatives, saying Ultra-MAGA, that and he referred to President Trump as the great MAGA king. And I think he thought this was a really good insult, but instead we kind of love it. I know I updated my Twitter profile to say supporter of the great MAGA king. I think my mom did something similar. And it turns out that was actually focus grouped for 6 months before they came up with it, with a longtime, well-known Democrat strategist who thought this was going to go over really well.
They should be fired. They actually got paid to come up with this, and they wasted time and energy in focus groups.
Yeah,
this is insane.
Research investigation, they said. Which,
oh gosh,
I mean, this is a bigger mistake than putting the exclamation point on Jeb's logo. You just didn't really hit the same note that you thought it was going to,
Right.
I love it. It's like a rally cry. It's better than when Hillary Clinton said deplorable. Now we've got the Ultra-MAGA
or build back better, right? Which is not going better.
At least that was inspiring to their side. It made sense. This is our goal. Ultra-MAGA as an insult. We're yeah, we are Ultra-MAGA. That's good.
But all of it is going to be used against him, right? Nothing is built, nothing is back, and nothing is better, right? That's going to be the mantra going into 2022. And I hate to say it, we'll probably go into a recession. And according to Larry Kudlow, he said yesterday that we're not going to immediately come out of this type of recession that is broad-based in every category. We're already experiencing food shortages, so whether it's baby formula or otherwise. So we need to brace for tough times. But just like any other tough time in America, this too we shall get through.
Yeah. Well, the only thing better about this administration, the better was the rally cry for conservatives, because I think Ultra-MAGA is going to be our best branding that we've had this year. And I can thank him for that, because it makes the t-shirts cuter, and at least we'll have those as we head into dark economic times. But I guess
he's giving us so much material, right? Let's go, Brandon. Come on, man.
The merch is better than ever. Started a trend. We started wearing our political affiliation a little more, and now you're giving us all these good things. We've got the FJB, the LGB, and the Ultra-MAGA, and I have all of them. So I'm gonna have to get an Ultra-MAGA cup so I can actually drink water when we do these.
Exactly, totally.
But that's all we have for this week. We'll see you next week. Please subscribe for more, and thank you for watching. See you later.